Now, I wanted to start off talk about Social Security, which is a subject that some of us are more interested than others.
Yes, I know.
And if I may say so, I think you've been less than really precise as to what you would do.
I think that's perceptive.
Okay.
Yes.
About Social Security, you don't want to signal in advance exactly what you would do. But I want to ask you a kind of a specific question, see if I can get an answer out of you. Sometime during your administration, if you serve 2 terms, it's likely that the IOUs, the Treasury bonds that have been, storing the money that you people have been spending, the Social Security surplus, that we will need to start cashing those in order to pay off the Social Security benefits.
Right.
Will we do that? Will the government? I mean, we had the President Bush running around saying these are just IOUs and they're not worth anything, but they are Treasury bonds.
That's right. That's right. Well, let me start by saying I do think Social Security has long-term challenges, and I fully intend to meet those long-term challenges. But what I've been trying to argue is that, first of all, it is not a crisis the way that the Medicare Trust Fund is a crisis. The health care system is a crisis, and I believe our energy and environmental policies are crises, and we may be facing some economic difficulties. So I don't want to be repeating Republican talking points about crisis. You know, that's what Bush has tried to do, to try to push a Democratic, Congress, and before that, Republican Congress, to do what I would have considered a grave disservice to the system that would have further destabilized it and, in effect, undermine Social Security as we know it.
You're talking about
privatization. If you look at what he did immediately after the '04 election, and I distinctly remember what you were referring to, he went down to some vault somewhere and opened it up and said, see, it's empty. That's like saying that the full faith and credit of the United States of America is worthless. I mean, it was such an irresponsible act, but why should we be surprised?
Then
right?
he went to China, which holds a lot of those bonds.
That's right. That's right. So here's my position. I believe that we have to move back to fiscal responsibility because when Bill left office and we had a balanced budget and a surplus, there was a plan in place that Vice President Gore would have implemented that gave all the way till 2055 for the solvency and pushed out some of the questions we had to deal with. And I think if we don't talk about fixing Social Security in the context of fiscal responsibility, I, as president, will lose one of the levers that I have to try to get the Congress back on the right path to be responsible. And I think there's a lot of reasons why we need to do that. But secondly, in order to meet the long-term challenges, there may well have to be some adjustments in a variety of options that everyone's aware of. I think the bipartisan commission model that President Reagan and Tip O'Neill used is exactly the right model. Therefore, when somebody running on the Democratic side for president starts saying, as some of my opponents have, well, I want to lift the cap on earnings, that's $1 trillion tax increase on middle-class families. So all of a sudden, you can just hear what the Republicans are going to say in the general election. I think it's not good policy, and I don't think it's good politics. So that's why I've said fiscal responsibility first, a bipartisan commission. I will deal with this during my term. I will try to deal with it in my first term because I think we do have to get back on the right track, and we can do it in a way that doesn't impose additional and difficult burdens on middle class or seniors. And that's why I'm trying to keep the options open and be able to say, let's solve the problem, but let's not do it in a way that shoots ourselves in the feet and takes Republican talking points.
But just briefly, quickly, do you make a distinction between the 2017 or whatever it is date when we have to start cashing in the IOUs and the 2040, 50 when the whole system runs out?
Right. Yeah, because the projections are that by 2017, if we don't do anything, and I think, frankly, what we have to do is not that burdensome, but it has to be agreed upon in a bipartisan way for it to be doable. We still have time even after 2017 to deal with this, but it should be dealt with, and it will be dealt with while I'm president. But I went back and looked at how President Reagan got convinced to do a bipartisan commission. He came at it from a different perspective. I come at it from a perspective, I intend to save Social Security. I intend it to be an intergenerational compact. And I have a plan to put American retirement accounts on top of what we already have. He came at it from a campaign filled with a lot of very negative rhetoric about Social Security and all the usual Republican attacks on it. And then he wanted to get in and do something, and the Congress said, forget it, we're not doing anything. And then he came to a bipartisan commission, and he and Tip O'Neill sort of made the agreement that they would let the commission do its will without political sniping from the president or other political leaders.
That was back when politicians talked to each other.
Well, we're going to do that again.
Oh, good.
I've spent a lot of time talking to my Republican colleagues. I've traveled with them. I've drunk with them. I've had fun with them. And
Good.
They're going to be welcome in the White House. In fact, I've had Republicans tell me they were actually in the White House more frequently when my husband was there than they've been since to talk about important, issues that are affecting our country.